The remains of a young woman found in 1989, still unidentified, but detectives say they do have a person of interest in her murder. We've obtained exclusive, never-before-seen video from the crime scene, giving us a glimpse into the day the discovery was made.
The date is November 24th, 1989. Time is approximately 11:45 hours. This will be a homicide scene. Body at this time is lying with the left arm underneath the body extended, with the right arm extended out. The carcass was pulled to this location by animals.
This is a Jane Doe case. The young woman's body was found one day after Thanksgiving in 1989 near Kingman. Tell me how the call came in.
It was called in from a couple walking their dog in the area off of approximately milepost 66 and Interstate 40 on Appaloosa Road. They came across the remains just in a brushy area where they were walking.
Yeah, and this isn't an area where people would walk around or frequent. This was more of a remote area, although the couple came across.
There are houses. It's still open desert, scrub brush. It's not like a concentrated city, but there are homeowners who live there.
Now, the way that the body was found, it was more of skeletal remains. So when looking into the body and the medical examiner, they had determined that the body was likely out there for quite some time, right?
Correct. They ascertained that the body was probably out there between 3 and 6 months, and that it was, in fact, a female.
Do we know anything else about this person? I mean, it's hard because she's still a Jane Doe, but what was she wearing? What else was found?
Well, her body was pretty mummified. She was out in the open in a thicket of brush where it had appeared that she had not been buried, she had just been left there, so that allowed the animals to, there was evidence of predation. She had no clothing, she was basically skeleton and mummified remains. She was missing a portion of below the knee on one of her legs.
Wow.
She had been out there in the elements, exposed for quite a bit of time.
Yeah, very tragic. And I know later on evidence was recovered from the scene. Talk about some of the items that were found. Let's take a look at this picture, if you can kind of describe what we're looking at.
This is actually, I believe it's like 2 or 3 days later, they actually really scoured the area, and they came across this blouse, which was not far from where her remains were recovered.
Wow. And you can still see some of the mud on a portion of the shirt there, but it stayed intact. I mean, after all this time, it's still in really good condition.
It was in pretty good shape. Again, when you're not exposed to the elements, it was more in the brush, in the thickets, so it's in the shaded area. It's protected somewhat from weather, and when they recovered it, and since that time it's been preserved.
Another thing that was located were some sunglasses. Can you describe those for us?
If you can see that they're Turbo brand sunglasses. I don't think that they're an expensive prescription set, but they were found not far from her remains, and once again, because of the evidence, she had been pretty much drug all over that area by the animals. So anything that was in that general area was pertinent to being tied to her.
Yeah, exactly. I know that there were a couple missing persons cases out there at the time. You guys looked into it, but there was never a hit of identifying this young woman and putting her as part of those missing persons cases, right?
Correct. They checked in 1989 she was checked. They go into a database. They put out a bulletin. Anybody who might have a missing person in a surrounding jurisdiction, or anybody who might even have knowledge of their missing person going to our area, would have contacted us, and we would have reached out to them to gather that information. And at that time, after they investigated all kinds of leads, but they never were able to come up with anyone even remotely matching her description.
Yeah. I know back then, the day of the scene and when investigators were out there, we looked at video of where they're kind of tracking which way footprints went.
What appears to be drag marks leading into the thicket. Around the drag marks, along the edge, are what appear to be foot tracks from a work boot or round-toed western type boot. Got an approximately 12-inch length. There are animal tracks across the bark. They are backwards, they're dug in. It appears that the person was walking backwards, dragging the victim.
And in looking at the pathway, you could see where there was a single tire track, probably that of a motorcycle. The drag marks were dug in heel first, indicating that the suspect dragged the body to the thicket where there was indication of a struggle, of a fight, which is also shown on the autopsy reports, but they could ascertain that after the fight, then he drug her further into the bushes to escape, I would assume, detection by anybody who happened to be frequenting that area.
The medical examiner did her report, and I know that in that they were able to find out some things, for instance, some type of contusion that the victim had suffered, along with some other things, if you can kind of describe that.
Yes, they could. I don't believe they could accurately describe for sure the cause of death, but they could determine that her nose had been broken prior to death, and that there was a possible hematoma on the left side, at the back left side of her skull, which would indicate that there was a serious altercation and that she was beaten, and that blunt force trauma probably contributed to her death.
From all appearances, this area in here is where the fight occurred. There are no drag marks leading away from this area.
There was a struggle. There was no, obvious gunshot wound or ligature strangulation or anything to that effect. So they were pretty sure that she had died because of the physical altercation.
And the woman at the time, we believe, was about 25 to 30 years old.
Correct. What they could ascertain, 25 to 30, about 115 to 120 pounds, blondish red hair. Her toenails and fingernails were painted red, and she had pierced ears that were clear stones with gold studs, which were post earrings, not dangling earrings.
Some interesting information came a couple months after the body was found. Someone came in with important details that they came across. Can you share some of that with us?
A person came into detectives, and it was probably a year later, with some pretty specific information leading to a possible suspect. He was present at a party where it was a group of bikers in the Kingman area, at a certain well-known house, and they were all telling war stories, and at which time one of the men there at the party made a pretty specific statement indicating that the woman who had been in the papers, who had been in that they were looking to identify, he said that he had indicated that he had killed her.
Wow, that's pretty shocking.
It's a pretty bold statement, and once again, you don't know if he's just bragging to try to get attention in the group.
Right. Or if it is the truth.
Or if it is in fact the truth.
Now, the case was back in '89. I think, a year later, maybe you got that information.
Yes.
What went on between that time and now? I know Mohave County has grown, and I know that the sheriff's office has grown, and now there's more resources. But the case went cold for a good bit of time.
It did go cold. There was some work done on it, but more of an attempt to identify who she was, and not as to who, in fact, did kill her. It wasn't until, I think it was 2014, that another detective was combing through cold case homicide files and came across the original information by the gentleman provided in 1991 that caused him to follow up and do more extensive research on the person who had been identified at the party.
Yes. And, unfortunately, time has passed. If you could go back, would you have tried to contact that person right away, the person who shared the information, and also tried to track down the person he was referring to?
Once again, I don't know what resources were available to them in 1991, but I know based on a nickname, they did try to identify who the person was by nickname and was unsuccessful, but I don't know how much their efforts extended beyond that. And that's probably the area that I would have worked a little harder in, especially because Kingman is a small town where everybody knows everybody, that quite possibly there would have been somebody out there that could have provided information for them to follow up on. Unfortunately, then you have the 2014 detective, all those years have passed, and then unfortunately now you have me all these years afterwards.
Yes.
Trying to follow up to identify her and find out who killed her.
This area right here, get down with the sun where it's brushed. This is where it starts dragging the body out. Right in here.
Now, you have spoken to someone who knew the person of interest.
Correct.
Were they able to share anything that is substantial to the case?
They shared with me some pretty substantial information that corroborated what the original gentleman said in 1991. Unfortunately, by the time I had it, it was considered not good enough. It was considered stale, and I could not get a search warrant as a result of that time period that had passed.
But at this point, even though the crime was committed in '89, you believe that the person of interest, from what you know, is still alive, and you just need information to come in. That way you can get a search warrant and be able to, maybe look through his home or be able to talk to him.
There's some specific evidence that I'm looking for that I need a warrant to be able to go into his residence to see if it in fact still exists, which would be pretty conclusive and would support the two people who have come forward to speak about this person of interest.
Yeah, and I had read that, you know, he did have a criminal and violent past. So, you know, that is all taken into consideration when you're looking at a person's of interest and all of that. I'm sure you do a full background check on these people before moving forward and thinking, okay, we're going to go this way versus that way.
Correct. He had his background fits the profile. His physical stature fits the profile. There are a lot of elements that fit in with the information that we obtained from these two people.
Now, was the young woman ever known to be a hitchhiker or hang out at any places? I'm not sure if any other information as to maybe what she was doing before or after, before her body was later found.
Well, again, if you look at different scenarios, and like I said, I can't say specifically what happened, if that is in fact the truthful that she went to this, you know, met up with this biker and somehow they wound up in that area and she was killed. But there's a truck stop. It could be possible. Prostitutes are known to hang out at truck stops. Her nickname, we call her Truck Stop Twiggy because the truck stop is right there. So it is possible she could have been a hitchhiker. It's just you can't say for certain without any evidence to corroborate what you think.
Now, there has been DNA that's been tested in the past. You're also still working with a lab in Texas, Othram, where they're looking at some pieces of DNA, and hopefully that will lead to something. But so far, there hasn't really been anything that's been a hit, correct?
Well, as far as DNA is concerned, we've looked at this extensively, and so did the detective in 2014. We have resubmitted anything. They cannot find any evidence of a male contributor as far as a sexual assault. However, we do have her DNA in an attempt to identify her. The lab in Phoenix was able to maintain a DNA extract, which we originally submitted to Gene by Gene for the profile to be created, and it was uploaded into GEDmatch, which is a public genealogical database. And unfortunately, if you look at her makeup, she is 96% Ashkenazi Jew. They're only like first or second generation, so it's hard to go back and research them generations back because all of the records are in Europe.
Yeah.
So far, we started out with Gene by Gene, but then we handed the genetic genealogy over to Othram in Texas because we've been working with them on other cases, and they have not been able to identify who she is. We had a couple of possibles, but nothing so far.
Now the databases right now, like the GEDmatch, is that because you said it was public? Is it to where, you know, let's say somebody goes and does, signs up and provides a sample and gets their family tree and history? If there's a match, will it let you know?
What I can do is what happens is she gets assigned a kit number, and you can log into that kit number, and it will show you what the closest matches are and who has submitted their DNA, and you are able to contact them through email as to who they might be as far as in relation to my Jane Doe.
Yeah.
Like I said, I tried. I thought I had found someone, and I found this. She'd been missing since 1986, which the years were off, but you never know. She could have been She was reported missing in '86, but she could have been off doing something else before her body was found. Her sister, I located her sister in Las Vegas. She was very nice to provide me with a DNA cheek swab sample, and unfortunately we compared and it was no match. So everything, I mean, she was European, she was second generation Jewish, didn't match.
I'm sure that is heartbreaking for you because you get really close to these cases. You were mentioning just this past week that you went over to go see where she is buried and go to the headstone and just be able to visit with her.
I talked to her and I asked her if she can please tell me who she is. It is so rewarding. It's sad, but it's rewarding, and the family always thanks you when you can tell them that we've identified you, and they say, you know, we figured, but we just never know, and now at least we have closure. So
that's beautiful, and hopefully by sharing this story, people will be able to come forward if they know anything, because you know there are people that are possibly still out there that know or went to that party that we were talking about in Kingman back in '89 that might know what happened.
I firmly believe that there are people out there who were present at that party or who have knowledge that someone told them or they heard. You know, no information should be ignored. Anything that might give us something to follow up on is appreciated, and it's kind of necessary at this point. In fact, we have got the okay to with Mohave County Silent Witness to offer up to $2,500 in reward money for anybody who would please come forward with any kind of information so we can find out what happened.
Yeah, because the next step is possibly securing a search warrant and being able to, you know, go and use that and hopefully get some more information, possibly lead to an actual suspect or take you to a different route, but you won't know until you get the information.
We have the leads that we have had, we've exhausted so far, so we're just asking for anybody to give us something to work with, to follow the next step. Like you said, it might lead us down an entirely different path than what we believe happened. But we don't know that until somebody comes forward with information to help us out.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Investigator Lori Miller with us from Mohave County, being able to share this story about a Jane Doe, but let people know that even though she's unidentified, she is still being remembered to this day.
She will not be forgotten. We will continue to work as diligently as we can. This case stays open forever, and until we can find out who she is and what happened to her, it will always remain open, and we won't stop looking.